right, first question this week comes in from Juna. Hey Matchbox, thanks for the informative and entertaining podcast. I had a question about training for a long ride, at least for my standards. I'm planning to ride a 200-mile gravel route in the beginning of June. Sounds kind of like someone else on this podcast. How should I spend the 4-ish weeks preceding my big ride? I've been following polarized training distribution model with most of my rides being easy and around 10 to 20% being what I suppose is around threshold level, however that is defined. So far, I've done a double metric century and it was doable but hard. My main goal is just to make it to the end, but it would be nice to be stronger than my friend.
Mhm.
I am somewhat time crunched. Is this like you guys?
I know, this sounds pretty, yeah.
I am somewhat time crunched and can squeeze around 6 hours or 4 rides a week with the possibility of a longer ride every other week. Should I stop the hard stuff and concentrate on volume or tempo-paced rides, or should I add some VO2 max work alongside the easier miles? If it makes a difference, I've been riding for around 20 years, mostly mountain bike and BMX, but I have taken road and gravel more seriously only during the last 2 years. My FTP is around 250 watts, and according to Power Chart, my shorter efforts are much stronger in relation to my standard FTP. And because I've understood you people like random health data, my systolic blood pressure is 120, whatever.
All right, now he's just yanking our shade.
Thanks, Juna.
He said he's right-handed.
Yeah.
His IQ is a solid 105.
Nice.
That's awesome. That's so good.
Yeah, so 200-mile gravel ride preparation.
How do you test your IQ? Can I just like look that up on the internet and get an IQ test? I'm curious now.
You can't look it up on Google. No one's going to tell you what your IQ is. You have to actually take an IQ test.
Can I look up a test and just find out my IQ through
I think there's different IQ tests. You could look one up on Google, but
you could get a general sense probably.
Yeah.
It's gonna be the next podcast.
Yeah, me and Dylan.
How about we all test our IQs before the next podcast and then we share?
Yeah.
I'm game.
What do you think's higher, your VO2 max or your IQ, Drew?
Whoa.
I bet they're both pretty darn low.
Okay, so back to Juna's question here.
Yeah, so I guess what this question really boils down to is if you're trying to do a really long ride, whether that be 100 miles or 200 miles or whatever is long for you, like you're trying to complete a long ride, because this is actually not this exact scenario, but this basic scenario is pretty common amongst people looking for coaching and looking for advice. They're trying to do a century, they're trying to do a double century, whatever it is. They're not necessarily racing, but they're trying to complete and feel strong while they're doing it and maybe be stronger than their friend who's also doing it. And I guess what the question really boils down to is like, okay, should I be doing more tempo? Should I be doing more VO2 max? What kind of efforts should I be doing? I will say that if you're talking about specificity, you probably shouldn't and will not be at VO2 max intensity very much at all during the course of this ride. If you're going much over zone 2, it'll probably just be tempo. But you probably won't even be at tempo the whole time. It'll probably be mostly a high zone 2 ride. So you could make the argument that if you want your training to be specific leading into this, you want to be doing tempo efforts and doing long zone 2 rides. Although I will say, just to raise general fitness right before an event like this or a ride like this, I do usually have athletes do what I call general intensity rides as well. Maybe in the last, because it's not a focus of yours, maybe that's only in the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks before. So it's not taking up a majority of your training, but by general intensity, I mean maybe throw in a 30-30 workout or a VO2 max workout, just so you're topping off basically right before the event.
This is tricky because 6 hours is 6 hours though. If they can't give any more than that, then yeah, we're talking about specificity, but I would suggest that their 2 intensity sessions be threshold. Because that's only, she said, or he or she said
Juna's a he.
Okay. For 6 hours or 4 rides per week. So that's an hour and a half per ride.
Yeah.
So.
Which, I mean, for relative fitness, if that's what your kind of standard volume is, if you're doing 2 rides a week that are accumulating an hour plus of tempo, like if you can really cram in, like that's a lot of tempo. If you're trying to make those 2 tempo sessions harder. But yeah, I mean, I think the trickier part is that Juna is only asking us how to spend the 4-ish weeks prior. Like I would want to know kind of what is Juna doing the other 8 months of the year. Like where is Juna coming in? Is Juna coming in relatively fit? I know we've got a 250 watt FTP, and he says his shorter efforts are much stronger, which I'm guessing that's probably just due to the mountain bike and BMX background, because you probably stimulate those more. But is 250 watts relatively low for Juno, or is that high? Like, are you coming in with a high level of fitness relative for yourself, or not? Because it says like so far he's done a double metric century. That's 120 some miles, so that's a pretty sizable ride. So Juno's obviously been doing something. But I'd want to know, kind of like Dylan was talking about, like there's the specificity, but you still want to go through some level of periodization just to make sure you're not hitting a plateau, so that you can generally raise your fitness level. So, Dylan was kind of talking about the general intensity in the couple weeks leading up, but is there room for in Juna's schedule to say do a proper VO2 max block early to try and get like a fitness bump before you get into the more specific phase where you're doing tempo or threshold work?
Yeah, so it's basically suggesting reverse periodization here.
Possibly, yeah. Again, just to make sure you're switching up the stimulus enough so that you're not reaching a point of plateau.
Yeah,
because 4 weeks is not a lot of time. Like you want to try and maximize those 4 weeks.
Yeah, did he say
is it 4 weeks or 4 months? Yeah, 4 weeks. That's what. Yeah.
Did he say that 6 hours per week is what he has to work with? Yeah.
But he also said he could get out for longer on the weekends. So I would push him to like 4 weeks out from the race and 2 weeks out from the race, like something like that. Do some try to get out and do basically as long as you could go. Like the double metric century thing, like 120 miles, that's good. Like if he could do that again, one of those 2 weekends or something, like I would say he should try to get in like another really, really long ride, if not 2 before the race, but I wouldn't do it within 2 weeks of the ride, so that he's not trying to recover from that mega ride. But I think that's always a good thing to do, just so that, you get more used to riding your bike for a really long time. It's hard to replicate that when you do a bunch of 90-minute rides.
Yeah, the only concern there would be if, like he gives us some context. He says that he did the double metric century and it was doable but hard. What does that mean? Like, did it take a week for you to recover from that? Because we, with only 4 weeks of training here and the lead up to it, like we don't want that ride to derail things. But I agree though, like having some level of confidence that you can cover the 200 miles is like important. Maybe you're not going to do 200 miles, but to do another double century and make sure, or double metric century, 125 miles, and just make sure like that ride either felt the same or better than it did last time.
Right.
Yeah,
just 120 miles was hard. Like, dude, you got to do another. You're gonna have to do a triple, like whatever century metrics, like
more than
do
triple
another
metric
80
century.
miles after that. So
yeah,
if that was hard, try doing another 80 on top of that, and that's gonna be your 200-mile race. Like, I'd say get as much volume in as you can, and I think specifically if you can't do longer than 90 minutes during the weekdays and you really have to take advantage of the weekends, then I'd say trying to get 1 or 2 like ultra long rides in would be, I think, beneficial as long as you recover from them.
So if we go back to it, I mean, the question is like, does Juna really only care about the 4-ish weeks here? Because that's what's hard to know. Like, He says he's following a polarized training distribution model, is doing some level of intensity 10 to 20% of the time. But he specifically asks the 4 weeks leading up to the ride. So, like, I guess I'd kind of go back to what Dylan was saying. Like, in that final 3 to 4 weeks, like, maybe you're just doing general intensity like you would normally do for a race. Well, assuming you've already covered all of your other bases, but that's what we're not sure, right?
Yeah, I usually in the last month before an event, I will have athletes do, if they have 2 intensity days in a week, I'll have one of them be race specific and one of them be general intensity. So in this case, race specific would be a tempo session probably, and then general intensity might be 30-30s or a VO2 max session. So your training is still specific, but you're also getting general intensity in.
Yeah, I like that.
I think that there's also, I feel like we should probably talk about nutrition, because that's something that he should be practicing right now on his rides, so that when it comes time to do the 200-mile ride, that's not completely foreign to him, getting in, 90 plus grams of carbs an hour. And then the other thing that I want to throw in there too, we can go further down the rabbit hole on nutrition if you guys want, but the other thing that I want to throw in there too is that I think a lot of times people try to do these really long rides in June or July when it's close to the longest day of the year, so they have the most sunlight possible. Makes sense, you'd rather do it in the daytime and not have to use lights. I get it. But doing a ride like, and I don't know if you can change the date of this. If you can't, then whatever. But I'm just throwing this out there, and this is something to think about. If it's really hot on the day that you do this, that will make such a massive difference to the success or failure rate of the ride. If it's hot, being hot is uncomfortable when you have to ride 1 hour. Being hot when you have to ride 10 plus hours, every single hour that you spend in the heat, it's exponentially worse. You get exponentially more dehydrated and your power drops more and more and more. Hot races when they're long are vastly worse than hot races when they're short, and spending a lot of time in the heat increases the failure rate. So it's just something to keep in mind. I mean, it might not even be hot when you do this, but you should think about that.
Yeah, it's almost like you're saying, maybe they're targeting June just because it's the longest day of the year, but if it's also one of the hotter days of the year, then you're you've got a 15-hour sunlight window, but it might take you 15 hours because it's going to be slower. Whereas if you had 12 hours during optimal conditions, maybe you could do it in 12 hours, right?
Yeah, and you could say it'd be slower, but honestly, there's a chance, like, if it's above 85 degrees Fahrenheit, you're starting to run into, am I even going to finish this thing?
Sure.
Because you could get halfway in and be really dehydrated and really smoked from the heat, and your power's dropping a lot, and you're like, I can't finish this thing. Whereas if you had just picked a day where it's like 60 degrees, you'd be fine.
So let's assume date's set. It's going in June. Would you include some heat training adaptation if there's even a chance that it's going to be hot that day?
Yeah,
hey,
I think
so. Got time. You can build yourself a sauna. Let's go.
Yeah, I absolutely would. Yes.
Build a sauna?
Well, I wouldn't build a sauna. I'd just order one from Amazon because I'm not a DIY guy. But yes.
Do you think?
You could do the hot bath too.
Exactly.
Nah, that ain't hot enough, Caitlin.
How do you feel about? Because people love to hate it, and I know he's potentially within 4 weeks, but if he's got an hour and a half, he does an hour on his endurance days, does an hour ride, and then a 30-minute run, like immediately after. I mean, you're not losing much, an hour versus an hour and a half of endurance, but I feel like there's much more to be gained from additionally adding a 30-minute run, because that's essentially like another hour ride.
Yeah. It's not the most specific thing. And this should be the month where you get very specific with your training.
Then
I mean, I get where you're going with this.
5-hour endurance rides
weekly,
but he can't.
Yeah.
Maximizing the time that you have.
One thing that I could see that working well with is for the heat training adaptation, you get a lot hotter on your runs. Like if you're running in the heat versus riding in the heat because you don't have as much evaporative cooling,
have the convection cooling.
That could be something that could be a possibility if you don't have access to any other form of heat training.
Or for 2-a-days. If he really wanted to try
I love it for 2-a-days.
Yeah. If he wanted to if he could really only get a 90-minute ride in after work, well then maybe he could squeeze a 30-minute run in before work.
Yeah, or at lunch break or something.
Yeah. And then you end up getting 2 hours of training in.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of power in 30-minute runs for efficiency and being able to include those as a way to increase your overall training volume.
Yeah.
In this case, I don't know that I would swap it out for equal parts, 30-minute run versus 30 minutes extra of riding. Especially because when you think about the transition, you're coming off the bike, then you got to change into your clothes. There's going to be you might lose 20 minutes of training time just in the transition. But if it's I can squeeze in another 30 minutes of training today by doing a run, all for that.
Yeah. I still do that to get more volume because I can run in the morning and ride in the afternoon, and that's an extra hours. At the end of the week, it's an extra hour or 2 of endurance training.
Yep. All right, Drew, we're going to take a quick break here because it's super cool. This episode is actually brought to us by some new friends over at Bicycle. Bicycle is the marketplace for pre-owned bikes and parts, and it's the safest, fastest, and easiest way that you can sell your bike or pick up a new bike today.
Yeah, we are pumped about this because Bicycle makes listing your bike the easiest thing ever. They give you can do it all through their website. It only takes a few minutes. They give you a fair price on your bike, so you're not just left there wondering how much am I going to get out of this thing. And unlike other marketplaces, you're not stuck waiting for buyers and all that stuff because they connect you to a worldwide web of all kinds of people looking to buy a new bike. So you don't have to deal with local people and all that stuff because you've got the whole world looking for bikes. And so that's pretty sweet. And then another thing is you don't have to chase down payments. They do all of the secure payments all through their website as well. They even give you the prepaid shipping labels, and if you need it, they'll even give you stuff to package up your bike. And on top of that, they come to your doorstep and pick up the bike. It's the easiest way to sell a bike online.
Yeah, that's right. So if you've got a bike that's just rusting away in the garage, or maybe you just want some extra cash in your pocket for this upcoming race season, head over to Bicycle today and list your bike. And then that way you can do something with that bike because they would rather see those bikes collect memories than collecting dust.
And on top of that, because of our new partnership with them, you get 30% off seller protection with code Matchbox30. So go to bicycle.com. That's BUYCYCLE.com/Matchbox and use the code Matchbox30 at checkout to get 30% off seller protection.
Yeah, we'll also post that link in the show notes. So if you want to head over there, it's an easy way to navigate it.
Cool.
The other thing I want to ask, because Dylan threw out there, he should be doing 90 grams of carbs per hour. We already said that he's most likely going to be doing endurance tempo. 90 grams for over 200 miles, that sounds like a quick way to turn your stomach and then not be able to take in anything.
Well, it depends on how well trained his gut is.
Do you take in 90 grams on your endurance ride? Endurance?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Okay, this is
pretty much every
idea that I suggested to Adam, but I feel like that's
every ride that I do that's over 2 hours long, I'm doing 90 grams of carbs an hour. Yeah.
I had this exact conversation with an older guy that I used to coach who's 50, and he was telling me he had to back off on the carbs on the endurance days because his body basically what he said was his body wasn't metabolizing all those carbs, so then he was just ending up with all these extra all this extra sugar in his
burning
system,
60% fat and 40% carbs at that point.
And he's older too, so his body isn't as efficient at burning through the carbs as Dylan's, and so for his endurance rides this year, and this is for health reasons, not even for performance reasons, he's dialing back the carbs so that on his endurance days, it's more of an equal part fat and carbs. And then when he bumps up the intensity, he bumps up the carbs, like what you're suggesting, Caitlin. So I think it kind of depends on the age of the athlete as well.
And it also depends on the power output. So what I will say is that this person's FTP is 250 watts, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'll do endurance rides at like 230, 240. So almost this person's FTP for 5 or 6 hours, right? So I need more carbs than this person does. I do realize that. But I think that I think that increasing the number of carbs per hour that you're consuming will probably just, especially on the day of the event, will just ensure that you don't bonk, because bonking is common on a ride like this, and you don't want it to happen.
Yeah, and we're just talking about, you know, a periodized nutrition approach too. You know, it's like we're trying to help you optimize for this 200-mile ride. We're not saying you should do this 12 months a year necessarily, but in the lead up to this event, to like help your event be more successful.
Yeah.
The 3 months leading in, maybe you're working on some gut training to be able to take in more calories, you know, in whatever form you choose. It's going to be easiest to take in straight carbs, but you know, even whatever it is, like you have to train yourself to be able to take in food on the bike while you're exercising. So yeah, I do think that there's going to be more emergence of concerns by over consuming carbohydrates in excess, you know, during exercise and health implications. But again, I think for the temporary, like if you're optimizing for an event, I don't think that's much of a concern.
Well, my suggestion would be just don't expect to fuel your 200-mile event for the first time you're doing this duration of an event with gels and drink mix.
I don't know. I disagree. I actually disagree. I think you could totally expect to do that. If you've trained your gut to handle gels and drink mix at a high quantity, I think you could totally do that.
You have to also consider that Dylan, when he thinks of a 200-mile event, is only thinking of Unbound and his situation. So
I'm not, dude. I think
it could go either way.
I'm thinking of this person when I say that. I'm not thinking of myself.
I mean, the ultra marathon world right now, I mean, they're doing 16 to 24 hour trail runs and 100% carbohydrates.
I don't think this guy's trying to race the thing, which is what Caitlin's trying to say.
He's trying to survive
if he ain't trying to race this thing, then yeah, eat some solid food.
He's doing
he's
6
probably
hours
feel
a week
better.
and trying to finish.
Yeah, I think I'm with Caitlin on this one.
I mean, we could argue about it, I guess. I don't think that you'll feel better if you eat solid food. I think having to eat solid food during a long ride is like, I don't think it makes you feel better. In fact, if anything, because I've done 7-8 hour races since I was 15 years old. I've done every sort of nutrition tactic. I've eaten PB&Js during a 100-mile mountain bike race. What I'm telling you,
this guy ain't racing. That's the point.
Look, but he's trying to not feel bad during it. Like he's trying to finish strong and not feel bad. Like I know he's not racing, but essentially for him, he's racing. Like
I think by having an Uncrustable or a Kids Cliff Bar or Fig Newtons or
I disagree.
A cookie, I think, versus how many hours of gels that could cause bloat and GI distress.
I come with Caitlin on this.
I actually disagree. I think that if you don't, it doesn't have to just be gels, but if you do a combination of drink mix and gels, that is the least likely to cause gut issues.
I disagree.
I'm on Dylan's side.
Okay, so we're 2 versus 2, 50-50 split here.
I think that's the protocol for an elite person trying to race 200
I think it's the protocol for anybody trying to ride a long time. I don't think you should be eating solid food.
Yeah, the question is how much can you tolerate? And I think the challenge is Caitlin brought up. He's only training 6 hours a week, and you're trying to train your gut to be able to accommodate a high volume of intake for, I don't know, 15 hours. That's probably the biggest unknown. But I think, I mean, if you drop that down and say you're doing 50 to 60 grams of carbs an hour, that should be fairly manageable.
Yeah, you should be able to tolerate that. Anything that you add that's not carbohydrates, like if you add fat, if you add protein, if you add fiber, etc., it's only making it more difficult for your gut to process that.
Yeah, I think if you're
That's how I feel. That's how I feel too.
If you're doing
I
VO2
agree with that, but
and
like
threshold,
I don't know. I'm kind of thinking that if the intensity is so low, then
yeah,
maybe not.
But for him, the intensity won't be so low. He's not trying to take
it is,
all
because
day
it's going to be
this.
a really long ride.
it's going to be endurance and tempo.
I know it's very long for him, but he's not trying to ride it slowly. He's trying to do it in a quick time. Like, I know it's not
he's got to
a
beat his
race.
friend. He's got
to beat his friend. I know it's not a race for him, but he's trying to do it as quick as possible. He's not trying to just lollygag out there all day and like, let's stop at every donut shop we see. Like, he's trying to do it in a quick time. And I think that if you want your gut to perform as optimally as possible when you're trying to ride as quickly as possible, which is what I'm assuming this guy is trying to do, you would want to do just gels and drink mix. Some people exclude the gels and they just do drink mix. I think that's fine too. I know plenty, like Caleb from Flow Formulas, who we've had on this podcast. He just does straight drink mix, even for a 10-hour race. Just drink mix.
Well, Juna should try it out, and
he's not going to have the opportunity to try it out.
Yeah, that's true. He's not going to. Yeah,
he could try it out. He could try it out on a 6-hour ride that he does before. Like, if he's got a month, he could do a 6-hour ride on the weekend before this happens, and he could try it out on the 6-hour ride.
Yeah, he should.
Well, he's got 2 months because it's not till mid-June.
Yeah.
This is a side note, but try to do this without offending Juna, but why do people do stuff like this?
Why
so
do you do the same thing, dude?
But I can train for it. This guy can't even train for the event that he's trying to do.
That's what makes
the thrill of the unknown.
That's what makes it even more fun.
I just don't get it.
Yeah,
Well, let me run a marathon, but I can only train. I can only run 3 miles right now. But let me.
Those
go
are the
do a
best
marathon.
stories. Think about those stories that the guy that off the couch to marathon.
I get
love
it.
those stories.
Yeah, we love those
Zero
stories, but it's
no
terrible.
pressure because you don't know what you're capable of. You just.
A part of me also. I
think Drew needs to push himself more. I think that's what you're telling us.
Me?
Yeah, you're making it too easy on yourself.
I'm saying I think people who do this to themselves already have a built-in excuse, because when he doesn't finish, he'll be able to say, I only had 6 hours to train for this. Why wouldn't you sign up for a 100-mile race, which you can actually train legitimately for and do well at?
I think the thing is he knows he can finish 100 miles. Like,
he already did. He finished 120 miles.
Yeah, exactly. He already finished 120 miles. So he's like, okay, well, what's the next thing? 200 miles.
Yeah, I mean, I guess finishing versus
this is the reason
fast
gravel has become so popular.
I know.
Because they're races that are very challenging. It's the marathon. Gravel racing is the marathon of cycling.
Yeah. Most people running a marathon are just trying to finish the marathon.
Yeah.
You know?
I guess I'm like so into this that I'm like, dude, if you're going to do it all the way. Like,
bro, dude, who's the elitist now on the podcast? Everybody always says I'm the elitist.
Don't sign up for something that's so crazy that you can't even prepare for it properly.
And
which one of us is about grit, Drew or me?
Drew.
Oh yeah,
I am, but I'm also about doing things properly, like training.
He is. Juna.
No way. 6 hours a week is not proper training for a 200-mile race.
Not
if we're
to
saying
try
that,
and
we're
win
lying.
the race. He's not trying to win Unbound. He's trying to beat his friend.
You're not racing. I see it. If you're not racing, then okay, I get it. But there's a lot of people that sign up for Unbound who only train 6 hours a week, and to me, you're signing up for failure.
Oh,
I don't know about that.
What if they finish though, and they didn't fail?
They do.
It's not going to be enjoyable.
It happens all the time.
I mean, I guess it's not supposed to be enjoyable, but
I mean, it's not enjoyable for us either. It also sucks for us.
Yeah, but at least we've prepared for it to suck.
Like nobody out there during Unbound is like, wow, this is so enjoyable. It's like getting a massage. I can't believe how much I'm enjoying.
Everybody is that way for the first 50 miles. Everybody's out there loving life.
Drew, you can say they're significantly tougher than you, because there comes that balance or that line that you cross when being out there longer, especially for Unbound in the heat, is just harder than being fit enough to race the thing and finish in a reasonable amount of time.
Tougher, dumber, however you want to say it. Yeah. Yeah. I'm just saying that's my honest opinion. If I was coaching somebody and they were like, I can only train 6 weeks, or 6 hours a week, I would say you should really consider if this is something you really want to do, because it's going to suck. Like, it's going to suck way more because you can only train 6 hours a week.
Yeah, but it's going to suck less than doing a marathon on 2 hours a week of training.
I don't know. I don't know how it transfers, but
it doesn't
hour to hour.
Yeah.
A marathon.
Well, anyways, Juna,
I don't know.
I think the rest of us here at the Matchbox, we're here for you. So we're championing you.
Yeah, sorry.
We want to see you get to that finish line. And let us know. Let us know how it goes.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to offend you, Juna.
You
Just trying to be the honest friend.
Did, but okay, let's move on to this next one. This is from Shane. Shane says, how would you train for that once a year event at elevation when you live at sea level? What a great question. Look how
don't do that either.
Matter of fact it is. Straight to the point.
Is
that it? That's
advice.
The whole question?
That's the whole question. Yeah.
Can people please send in questions like that more often? That's perfect. That's perfect.
Just one sentence.
When your question is like 3 paragraphs long, look, I get, and I get it because half the time we're sitting here like asking for more context. But man, something nice about being succinct about your question.
So this is very common. This is basically the Leadville effect.
Yeah.
You're training for one altitude race a year.
Yeah.
How goes
So
it?
if you can go to altitude beforehand, I don't know. I'll give a number of scenarios here. If you can go to altitude beforehand, you want at least 2 weeks there. If that's and if you can be at the race altitude for 2 weeks, that's the best case scenario right there. Even longer, I guess, would be better. So 3 weeks would be better. 4 weeks would be better. If you can't do that, there's debate about what the next best protocol should be. Should you go the day before? Should you go a couple days before? Some people say that if you go a couple days before, that's the worst because you're experiencing all the negative effects of altitude, but none of the positive effects yet. That's why you go the day before. I will say that if you actually look at the scientific literature on this, it's not very cut and dry. There actually are studies where they had subjects be at altitude for only like 3 or 4 days, and they actually did perform better. So I know that is common advice that's given. What I'm saying is that the science doesn't really bear that out. I'm not saying the science bears out a different answer. I'm saying that it's in conflict. And that's probably because how quickly people adapt to altitude is highly genetically dependent. So you could be a quick responder, you could be a slow responder, you could not respond at all. There are people that don't respond at all to altitude. So, and you don't really know that if you haven't been out there.
And when you say quick or slow to respond, you're talking about the adaptation to altitude, right? Not the effects that altitude has on your performance.
Actually, both. Both. Yeah. There are some people that altitude doesn't affect their immediate performance as much as other people. Some people are just genetically gifted at handling altitude well, whether that be adapting quickly or actually performing well at altitude when they just got out there.
Yeah, we don't like them.
Right. So it's kind of hard to give a recommendation if you don't know personally how your body reacts. I think that this is a good opportunity to see how your body reacts when you go out there and see if you feel terrible after 3 days or you feel great after 3 days or vice versa. Because I think this is a scenario where you do have to kind of lean on your own personal history at altitude to make the proper decision.
So with that being said, I feel like if you can't get there 2 weeks before the event, but that event is 6-8 months down the road, but you can get there for whatever reason over the course of this week. Like if you have an opportunity to go and see how you feel there, do it. And I do believe
you're saying before, like doing a practice run at it.
Yeah. like months before. If you had the opportunity to go see how you feel while you're there, and at least you know what to expect when you come back. And I do believe the more frequently you're exposed to it, your body is able to be like, oh, we've been here before, and adjust a little bit quicker.
Yeah, I think that's good advice.
Also, if you can't go to altitude at all before you go, heat acclimation is the next best thing. So again, we're plugging saunas again. We should just become the sauna. We need a sauna sponsor for this podcast at this point.
Dizzle's DIY sauna building.
I was gonna say Dizzle just put one in.
I'll build you a sauna if you pay me. And I'd say just lower your expectations. That's what I would do. That's what I would do if I was. I'm trying to think of my situation. If I were doing Leadville, I've never done Leadville. I hate altitude. It wouldn't be my A race. I wouldn't put that many eggs in that basket. I'd make it a B race, and I'd still go and try to perform my best. But I would, and I don't. If I were to do Leadville, I don't think that I would. I don't think I could go out for 2 weeks before, so I'd probably be there for like a week or something, or a few days, and then knowing that, I would just lower the expectations. Like, go there and want to perform the best, but knowing like, yeah, like this is going to be really tough for me to get a really good result or whatever. Not like, a sea level race. I can't go in. You just can't go into it with the same expectations as a sea level race if you're not that prepared for it.
Unless you find out you're someone that, like Dylan was talking about, that responds well at altitude.
Which could be the case.
Altitude doesn't affect your performance as much. If that's the case, then you should race at altitude as much as possible.
I guess so, yeah.
I will say that those people are few and far between, though.
I was about to say,
it's not like it's a 50-50 split. I don't know what the percentage is, but it's
actually
the low single digits percent.
Yeah, the chances that you just so happen to be a person who responds really well to altitude is low. So,
or you could be like Kerry Warner and just suck even more. Didn't he go to altitude and then he just he was there for a whole month and then he still was just terrible? And I mean, he would say that, wouldn't he?
So I don't know if Kerry is one of these people, but there are people that don't respond at all to altitude. Like, they could spend their whole life at altitude and they don't respond. So
I think I'm one of those people.
Okay.
The reason that I don't want to do Leadville is because one time Dylan told me that he was the highest placed non-altitude living person, right? Isn't that what you said? And you were like 17th or 18th place or something. I'm like,
classic.
Well, then I'd be like 50th because there's like there. If you're the best of the non-altituders, then no way.
So. This might not be related to what's his name? Shane's question. But Dylan, have you guys seen any studies out there comparing the effects of sauna or heat adaptation to altitude tents? Because altitude tents used to be all the rage, but now heat training is the rage. And for altitude crossover adaptation. Yeah.
I actually think that there is a pretty decent chance that sauna is more effective for altitude than an altitude tent.
That's kind of what I was wondering. Yeah.
Yeah, and the reason I say that is because in order for an altitude tent to be effective, you have to spend probably more than 15 hours a day in it. And you're thinking, okay, 16. Well, like I'll set up my office in there and I'll sleep in there. Like I can do that. You don't realize how hard it is to spend 15 hours a day in an altitude. I had an altitude tent in college.
Of course you did.
Yeah, I was the weird kid who had had like a tent in his dorm room.
That wasn't the only reason that you were weird.
That's not the only reason I was weird, but yeah. No, people made fun of me for having a tent in my dorm room. I was tent boy. Which is fine, Awesome. But yeah, it is so difficult to spend that much time in your altitude tent. You think you can chill in there. It's not really fun to chill in an altitude tent. It's really not.
Right.
You have to spend a lot of time, and also, even if you do spend that much time in the tent, it's questionable whether the effect is nearly the same as being at actual altitude. It's probably not. So,
and when you do the sauna, you don't have to be in the sauna for
20
20-ish minutes. So
Exactly.
it's even if that doesn't work, hey, you only wasted 20 minutes of your life instead of 12 hours.
Yeah.
And something to keep in mind too, I think we have talked about this before, but comparing like a non-adapted altitude athlete to an adapted altitude athlete, the percentages are low still. You know, we're talking like 3 to 5% difference, likely, maybe even less, depending on who the person is. So
you're talking about like the hit
the effects on performance,
their hit that their power takes.
Yeah,
right.
I think some people have this assumption that the difference between acclimated and not acclimated is like 20 or 30% or something crazy. It's really not that big. We are talking about 2, 3, 4% differences
because you're not acclimating back to the same level that you were at sea level. That's not what's happening. What's happening is you're just reaching a state of like homeostasis at altitude, and that's going to allow you to, you know, improve your performance by 3 to 5% at most for a lot of people. So I think even like with Leadville, I think it gets overhyped. You know, a lot of people that call them, you know, everyday Leadville enthusiasts, you know, like they're going there to, you know, break 12 hours or try and beat their PR or break 9 hours. I think they overemphasize the need to acclimate, and they'll go out there 3 weeks early or 2 weeks early or a week early, which is like the worst case, just to try and like get that acclimation effect in, and not understanding like the added stress, the decreased training effectiveness when you're at altitude, you know, just being out of your comfort zone. All that can almost negate it at some point if you're not, you know, taking the approach carefully. So not to say like if you can acclimate, it is better, but it's not like it's not going to be the difference between you finishing the race and not finishing the race.
Yeah, agreed. I think that honestly, the placebo effect of thinking that you're acclimated may be stronger than the actual effect.
I could see that. Yeah.
I didn't get to say this earlier, and I don't remember the specific details, but one of the reasons why the tent doesn't work is because you're not experiencing the pressure change, which is what triggers a certain part of the brain to actually signal to the body to increase the amount of EPO.
Yeah. So when you go up in altitude, pressure drops, but when you're in a tent, pressure doesn't drop. They're just pumping. I think they're pumping nitrogen in. Don't quote me on that. I think they're pumping nitrogen in so that there's a lower percentage of oxygen in the tent, but the pressure hasn't changed.
That's interesting. I actually didn't know that. I assumed that it was adjusting the barometric pressure as well, but
they do have ones that do that, but they're not tents. They're like barrels.
Chambers. Yeah,
they're chambers.
Okay.
And they're much more expensive.
Yeah. And they're very small.
Yeah.
You can't set it up as like an office.
Hours in there.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know. Hopefully that helps, Shane. Another thing too, being as fit as possible. Yeah. The more fit you are, the better you're going to do at altitude, just like you would do at sea level.
I mean, if you can increase your FTP by 10% and then it drops by 5% because of altitude, hey, that's a net 5.
Yep. Okay, last question here. This is from Jan. Combining endurance with intervals. What are your thoughts about combining threshold or VO2 max work with endurance? What's so funny?
Because it's not an endurance ride. I mean, what is this question?
Is it super effective or limiting adaptations? Well, I think so. I mean, this is a very common situation, right? For a lot of people, you know, they'll have one specific intensity session a week, and then sometimes they'll do like a long intensity session where they'll do intervals and a long ride combined into one, right? I used to pretty much exclusively prescribe my intervals for athletes at the beginning of the ride and then have them add on whatever they want at the end of the ride for extra volume. But now, I mean, for a lot of my endurance athletes that are doing endurance marathon mountain bike events or gravel events, some of these longer events, I've kind of flipped that on its head because I mean, the research does show that the effectiveness as far as at like the mitochondrial level, like the adaptations that are taking place from endurance or aerobic conditioning, is hindered after intensity, or it takes some amount of time to get back to that homeostasis where you're actually effectively affecting things at the mitochondrial level with endurance training.
Because when you do intensity, you're changing your physiological state, right? Like,
yeah, and
your body's going to be on like high alert or high burning or whatever. So it isn't just like you do high intensity and then you pop right back down to endurance, and it's
correct. Yeah,
because it takes a bit. Yeah, I was just trying to clarify what you were saying.
So by switching that and doing endurance first, you're able to get like that quality base training in. So like that's, very effective. And then doing your intervals later, now you're disrupting things. It may have some effect on the intervals, but it kind of depends on what the athletes, what block we're in for training too. Like if we're just doing threshold intervals, I'm probably not that concerned if their threshold intervals are affected by a couple percent. If we're doing something like VO2 max training and we're looking at doing the VO2 max block, not specific to race conditioning, but more just general VO2 max block, then maybe that has more of a detriment and there's a concern there. But a lot of times with those, I won't even combine it into a longer ride anyways. I'm just having them do a VO2 max session. But like Caitlin, you were laughing at the beginning because it's like, as soon as you throw intervals into the mix, pretty much for quite a long time after that, that's not really an endurance ride anymore. That's an interval session.
I would say that if you're gonna do threshold or VO2 max, think of it as like an on-off switch. Like, just because you do a little bit of threshold on your endurance ride, don't think of that as endurance ride. That has now turned on to, or that has been flipped into a intensity day. So like, don't just add a little bit of threshold on all your endurance days is what I'm saying. Like, if you're going to do that, do it 2, maybe 3 times a week and make those your intensity sessions. Otherwise, I think you probably are compromising your overall.
Oh, totally agree. Yeah,
I think
wasn't even
they
thinking
can
there.
get away with like sprinkling in some intensity on their endurance rides, and I would say that's a bad way to think about it.
The on-off switch is actually the exact analogy that Steven Seiler uses in the study that he did about the autonomic nervous system and intensity's effects on the autonomic nervous system.
Yeah, I was quoting him when I said that.
Yeah.
We just talked about durability testing or durability workouts or whatever you want to call it. But I mean, that's adding endurance between intervals on an intensity day intentionally. I think that's a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
But that's an intensity day, and that should be considered an intensity day. Yeah.
You can call it a durability day, but a durability is just a fancier way of saying intensity. It just means long intensity.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the reason why I sort of reversed my approach with some of those, I mean, it's not even targeting durability necessarily. It's just that, like, if an athlete only has 8 hours a week to train, and 8 hours is very reasonable, like that's actually a good amount of volume that they can do. 8 hours, we'll take that all day for most athletes. But that's still pretty limited in how much base training they're able to get in each week, how much, just standard aerobic conditioning they can fit into their week. So let's say, that athlete's doing 2 hours worth of intensity. That means they're only getting 6 hours worth of endurance training a week. I want to make sure that 6 hours is actually effective. So by getting that extra hour of quality intensity in on the weekend, by flipping that instead of after the intervals to before the intervals, now that's contributing to that, to their aerobic base in a more effective way. So that's part of why I've switched that.
I think something that occurs often with athletes that I've coached is like, for one reason or another, they can't do, a lot of times I'll do Saturday intensity, Sunday endurance on the weekends. For some reason, they can't do their Saturday intensity. So I'll say, combine it with Sunday, because I still want to like take advantage of the weekend and you getting in, a bigger amount of volume than you can during the week. But I also don't want you to miss your one of two of your intensity sessions, because then you're chopping your intensity in half for that week, basically, if you just skip that workout. So oftentimes I'll, one way or another, combine those so that Sunday they still get the intensity, but they also get like exactly what you're talking about, the durability workout. A lot of times I'll separate them and like they'll do a shorter intensity ride and a longer endurance ride. But if we have to, I'll combine them and it'll basically just turn into like a durability workout.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, in some of what I think it's Seiler has talked about too is like another option for athletes is like 2-a-days. You do your intensity session in the morning, separate it by 2+ hours, and then go do an endurance session in the afternoon. And
because then your body
that won't
has
have
the time
that shouldn't have an effect on it as long as you're recovering well between. If that's an option for people, that could be an approach if you can't do that extended ride like you're talking about.
Yeah. And you would do the intensity first?
Probably, yeah, depends. I mean, if you're coming off of like a rest day or something, sometimes I'll do like an endurance session in the morning just to, kind of as like a refresher, but then do intervals in the afternoon. But for most people, I would do the intervals first.
Yeah, especially in the summer, like if it's going to be super hot middle of the day,
sure,
you would want to do your intervals before it got too hot.
Okay, anything else?
I think that's it.
All right, sweet. Thanks, guys. We'll catch you next week.
Sounds good.